Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and it is currently Thursday, January 16th. So this is an episode of Investment Friday, which will be posted on January 17th, 2025. So I'm here with Brad Haines, Chief Investment Officer of Juncture Wealth Strategies. Again, January 16th, posting January 17th. We've got some stuff coming up, right, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend's going to be the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. So the 47th president of the United States. And that is going to have, I mean, the inauguration itself won't have necessarily many economic impacts, but a lot of the policies he's been announcing and trying to put into place, or at least preparing to put in place, will have a lot of economic consequences. So it's something that we need to watch pretty carefully on what he's actually going to pursue and when. This week, a lot of his cabinet appointees or his candidates that he's put forward for different parts of his cabinet have been going in front of the Senate committees, and they've been answering a lot of questions. So I think we're getting a little more detail on how President Trump's going to try to implement some of the policies he announced during his campaign. So we'll until it happens with President Trump, you never know what's going to happen. So we just have to do a wait and see. But I imagine next week at this time, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And something you mentioned yesterday in our investment call for our group was that normally you would have like a year look ahead by now, right? So normally in January, you put out your what are the trends to look out for this year, but we're gonna wait a hot minute for that, right?
Yeah, we're definitely going to wait for a hot minute because I don't want to be wrong the instant my market update comes out. So I'm waiting to see how his implementation, because some of his policies do have pretty dire economic consequences, either good or bad, and so before uh, I take on the short-term task of making predictions and forecasts for the next 12 months, I want to see how he's going to go about implementing some of these policies. What I also said yesterday was there's two trends which investors and clients need to really understand. Is one, short term, a lot of what the government does through the Trump administration is going to be impactful over the next 12 months. Tariffs, tax cuts, all those different types of things are going to be impactful for the next 12 months. Okay. If we take a step back and we take our view a little bit longer than 12 months, but we go 3 to 5 years, we're in the midst of an innovation cycle. I know in the narrative in the media has been a lot about artificial intelligence, but that's only one component of a much broader innovation trend with nanotechnology, robotics, obviously artificial intelligence, communication, mobile communications, personalized medicine. All of those trends are starting to really upcycle with artificial intelligence, both physically and computationally being able to occur and to come about and to have some really good use cases. And that's where I think this year, second half this year, you're going to hear a lot more about the innovation trends. And I think that's a longer term trend. That's a really, really beneficial trend for economic growth and for equity earnings. So stock prices are based on equity earnings. And if equity earnings go up, stock prices go up. And so because we're just barely scratching the surface on this innovation wave, I think if clients take a little bit longer outlook than just 12 months, you're going to see it's a very, very nice time to be in the equity markets.
Mm. That's always a good frame, right? Because we talk a lot about short-term things, what's happening this week, what's happening today, what report came out, what are the fluctuations that we are experiencing right this moment. But our true jobs, right, as financial professionals, CFP, CFA, right, we are here to be the ones that help see the bigger picture and help our clients see the bigger picture as well and the longer term um, picture, just in general. So I love that reminder. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, for the topic that I wanted to bring in today, I wanted to really talk about relationships again. So, we're doing a whole relationship series on the podcast with lots of different people coming in talking about relationships in different ways. And one piece that's really, really important, especially for we're gonna really focus on spouses today. Um, so when you are in a romantic relationship or have a spouse and life partner that you live with and you share finances with and have long-term goals together with, money is one of the most touchy subjects. It's one of the most like hot button issues that we see. And like in divorce statistics, it's one of the biggest drivers of divorce is that people do not agree on how to manage their lives together from a financial standpoint. And so when we talk about money and relationships, there's a lot of energetic and relational pieces to it that I like to talk about and I think are important. But where like when we talk about the money, literally talking, physically talking, speaking with your mouth, right, to your spouse about money can be really difficult for some people. And if we can help people understand how to do that and how to do that successfully and how to, even talk to their investment advisors, and like all of that, being able to have conversations around money that are productive and uplifting and insightful and collaborative, that leads to stronger, better relationships overall. What do you say to that, Brad?
Oh, I completely agree. In my experience over the last 30 to 35 years, I would say it's not only everybody needs to be on the same page in terms of the goals, the expectations, um, the style of money management, like your budgeting when you're early on, and even later on, your budgeting techniques, because every person is different, and we bring in from our childhoods, from viewing our parents and how they did things. We bring in these preconceived notions of how a household budget should be run. And
Mhm.
so sometimes that is not the same as our partners or our spouse's experience. They may come from a very, very different place. I'll give you an example. I grew up pretty poor, very, very poor. My wife did not. She grew up in a pretty affluent household. So our views on money and how you manage it and the importance of managing it were very different.
Interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more? Because that is a common dynamic. I mean, like literally that's the same with me and my husband.
Yeah,
His family was very comfortable from the time he was a baby, right? Like his dad out of college, I think his first job was working at Texas Instruments. Um,
nice. Good
right.
for
And
him.
then from there to Motorola and like so they had a professional job. And my parents had a business that was like struggling to get off the ground at
Yeah.
that same time, right, of my life. So we have a similar story that way. I'm curious how does that play out for you?
Well, for us, it played out in the sense that for me, having so when we were early on, Someone made the comment, $50 in your checking account after paying all the bills is peace. Okay. $50 negative after paying all the bills is utter chaos in your life. Okay. So that was I paraphrased a little bit, but that's essentially the point that the individual is telling me about. And to me, having less than zero was not an option. I interpreted it as an existential crisis, whether I would die or something like that. I mean, I felt it did not, I stressed about it more than I think my wife did because she was like, oh, this will always work out. And in my mind, I was like, no, this may never work out. Like this, we have to have positive balances in there, And again, $50, I wasn't expecting a lot. We were young, we were broke, you know. I was going through college. She was still going through part of her college, yet working a little bit. So, and I was working a little bit, but we just didn't have a lot of money. But the fact that we needed to have a little positive, and I interpreted it the downside far more negatively than she did. She was much, much more resilient in the sense that going through financial distress, um, she was okay with because she knew it all work out. Whereas I interpreted it like this may never work out, like ever. And she's like, no, no, it'll work out. Don't worry about it. I mean, so I interpreted the downside far more aggressively, and I still do today. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I work hard and I've really put an extra effort in my career is to make sure that I can provide for the family, I can take care of myself, and that we can have those positive balances. Um, another difference was as you get married and as you come together as couples, you each had different money management techniques. For me, I budgeted out every week because I got paid weekly. So this is early on. I would budget out my money when I was single every week. I knew exactly how much money I could spend on food, entertainment, car, all that stuff. Um, whereas she didn't do that as much. So when we got together, and got married, I was like, okay, well, how much do we have for food? I don't know. Go shopping, go grocery shopping. So to me, that always stressed me out a little bit. So we had to come together with how to budget. Um, Today, she budgets far more than I do. She is a phenomenal household money manager. I mean, she does a fantastic job. In fact, I told you before you're recording, if I overspend in one area, she knows within a couple days, and she's questioning me about it. Not saying I can't do that, but just saying, hey, is this you? I noticed this was bigger purchase than normal. Is this you? Is it or is
Mhm.
it fraud? Right. So um, I know she's watching that very, very closely, which I appreciate. So yeah, I mean, we had friends that used to, when they were broke, used to have the envelope method. Have you ever heard about the envelope method?
Yes.
Where you
Yeah, we
put
had
cash
that
in
when
the
I was
different
young.
envelopes.
Hmm.
Okay. And then when that envelope's gone, you're done with that category. Right. So to me, that never worked because I like cards, debit cards, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. So, but for other people, it worked. Some of our friends, it worked great. So, everybody has their own little style and how they can track and spend money.
Well, and then you were also telling me kind of now, so what's your dynamic, right? How long have you been married?
Over 30 years,
And then you've been an investment manager for how long?
about 30 years.
Okay, so same time. Okay, like basically, right?
Yeah.
What is it like now? Like how do you make decisions together? Um how do you talk about your future goals, right? Because your kids are older now too, right? In college, and out of college. And so what does that look like for you now?
Yeah. So, what it looks like is we divided and conquered in our household. Like we know our goals, like we set our goals together. What's our main financial goal for this year? for this next 5 years and longer term, right? I'm going to make an example of retirement, right? That's an easy one. We're, early to mid 50s. Retirement is, not really close, but it's not too far away either. And so that's our main goal is to do that because we just finished up paying for college. We have one kid that we still have to pay for, but that shouldn't be too onerous. Um, so our main goal is retirement. Okay. Well, we've split the duties. She manages the day-to-day, the month-to-month bills, paying, all of those types of things she does. I manage the investment portion because that's what I do, right? That's what I do. I manage investments for a living. So she just
Might
says,
as
you
well.
just do that. I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and that and the like. Whereas she over the past 30 some odd years has become better than a big five or big four auditor when it comes to managing our balance sheet or our income statement. So she does a fantastic job there. So we've divided and conquered. And then we periodically sit down and go over the results. Where are we financially from the investment standpoint? Where are our accounts? What are the account numbers? Who are the account representatives that if I passed away, that my wife could then contact that person and say, hi, hey, this is who I am. Brad passed away, all the sorts. So she knows how much we have, where we have it, who to contact, the phone numbers, addresses, all of those relevant details for all of our investments, both public and private. Um, Whereas for her, she manages all the bank account type, month to month thing, putting stuff into savings, giving me money to invest more, and then paying off bills. So that's how we've done it is in fact, yesterday we were just talking about some of the big expenses we have coming up this year with things we just want to do, right? So, we're allocating for different months, how much money per month do we need to save to get to that point where we can plan the trips or improve the house or the like. So it's that constant communication on a periodic basis, touching base on both the investment and the, which is our balance sheet, and the income statement is where she focuses her time with the income and outgo, um, and just touching base and reconfirming that that's our goal and how close are we getting to our goal, and what things do we need to change to get closer to that goal.
I'm going to give you a question that I don't, maybe you might expect it from me or maybe not. How do you feel in those
Oh,
conversations?
I would absolutely guarantee that that was going to come. That question was going to be asked by you. Um, it feels good because one, both of us know what's going on, how we're doing, and no one's in the dark. Okay. For example, this year, we hired a new CPA to do our taxes personally. Um, she doesn't want to be involved. Like she's not involved in tax prep at all. I am. That's my again my list of duties. Um, but she does need to know who they are, what their name is, how to contact them if she has questions, and feel comfortable. So in the introductory meeting, she will be there, but then she will step back out until there's a massive need and I'm not available. Okay. Um, so I want her to know enough that she feels comfortable that the people we're hiring to do our taxes are doing well. They're going to do a good job for us. My wife has her own practice, so a lot of times she has questions, but she sometimes feels better if I pose those questions to a CPA because we can talk the same language a little bit. Whereas she doesn't want to be in the dark when I can already speak the lingo. Um,
And your wife's a psychologist, is that right?
Correct.
So we've talked about this a little bit before, never on the podcast, I don't think. But one of the reasons why I asked, like, how do you feel in those conversations, does it feel comfortable for you to like that's like, for some people they're like, I feel choked up. I can't even talk. I feel so anxious, right? Like there's so many emotions that get tied up in the money conversations. So, you being an investment professional, her being a psychologist, right? Like you've got this really special balance. So yeah, I was just curious,
Well,
like,
special balance, tension, whatever. It's always, uh, I mean, I'm comfortable now. This is a 30 some odd year process. You're
mhm,
seeing the end of it, right? And every couple goes through this where you have bumps in the road where you need to revise the process or life changes over time, and so your income goes up or your expenses go up and you need to change the process a little bit. Um, but uh, for those people who, and I'm speaking a little bit from my experience with her background in working with, patients and clients. Um, I'm going to ask a question is why are they anxious about it? Like, I know why I'm anxious. Like, if we get a little tight below a certain dollar amount in liquid cash, I know why I get that way. I get very anxious. I get very uptight, difficult to breathe. Like, I start having panic type symptoms, um, because of how I grew up.
yeah.
Even though I'm in a far different situation than how I grew up. Okay. But it still is that, for some reason, it's that innate, embedded feeling that I had. Okay. So, and everybody treats that feeling a little differently.
Hmm.
Um, so it depends on, I think people who get real anxious about finances, they need to go and see someone professionally and talk through, because a lot of times financial decisions are made emotionally,
Right.
and that emotional decisions are almost never the right one to make, right? We've heard about the person that is in real financial distress, but has to go buy something new to make themselves feel better to get through that stress, right? Well, that's increasing your financial distress to make yourself feel better. So there's an underlying cause of the shopping behavior that person needs to get to the root of. Once they solve or at least cope with the underlying problem, then the financial decisions become much, much easier.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I think it's really important for people to understand how deep. I mean, I call that money stories. Like when we talk about our money stories, that's it. That's exactly what we're trying to understand, right? So if in the course of the conversation, I notice one partner, getting really anxious or getting really tight around, constricted in literally how they're sitting or how they're talking or how they're breathing, um, like, hey, what's coming up here? What's going on with that so that we can work through that together. And I say a special relationship like with your wife, just that say she might be, I would imagine, someone who can see that maybe more clearly than
For sure.
someone who's not a psychiatrist or psychologist that talks to people about this kind of stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I'm better now with communicating. Um, if I'm starting to feel anxious, then I'll be like, hey, I'm not doing well because of this particular thought in my head,
Hmm.
right? And so and then we have to work through that together, for whatever the cause is. And so, you know, again, processes take time to get better, but I think as we get older, it becomes far easier. I think what I would say is, if you're in a relationship with someone who is anxious about money, you need to be very open and non-judgmental when you're talking to that partner or spouse about money, because there may have be some trauma related to finances that you don't know about and that they may not be even aware of.
Yeah.
Um, so it's something that's really, really important. But the more you talk about it, the more you guys work together as a partnership to overcome or to better understand those feelings. I think it increases the chances of success in that relationship dramatically.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you can work through the thing that was coming to mind as you were talking is, when there are financial um challenges or issues or someone's feeling anxious about, this is happening and it's making me feel anxious because of this reason. It's that classic, can you turn together towards the problem? Right? So we're a team looking at this together, not we're on opposite sides of, right? We're not seeing each other as the problem. We're seeing, oh, here's a problem and we're going to face it together.
Exactly. We're a team.
Right. Yeah, you have that team mentality around it, and viewing finances in that way, making it a team sport basically is one of those ways that we turn that, what can be really really toxic for relationships into something that turns into like growth opportunity where you can support each other, where you can learn how to love each other better, and be stronger in your relationship because of it. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I mean, it's really important. Like you mentioned earlier, divorce, um, 80% of divorces are due to some kind of financial stress.
Hmm.
So if you can get through and learn how to discuss finances without being accusatory or defensive, depending on what side of the conversation you're on, it's really important. And I think it's important, and it will benefit your relationship in a lot of different ways because your communication skills improve for not just finances, but for everything. So
Right.
all the other issues that could come up in a relationship, finances are just something that is ever present, right? It's a monthly thing. We have to pay our bills on a monthly basis. We earn money on a monthly basis. We have the pressures of life with possibly children or dogs or what have you. I mean, I have two little French bulldogs, and they cost more than you would think. They're like mini kids.
Oh,
So
God. Well,
it's
I have two labs and one of them takes seizure medication, right? Like he's the most expensive dog we've ever owned.
yeah. Yeah,
Because
I
he
mean
has to
it's
eat fancy food and take seizure medication twice a day. Um, but yeah, right? Like, of course, he's very sweet and he's worth it. And it's not that bad. But anyway, I wanted to share my perspective a little bit too, because it's, in our household, I'm a CFP. I have been the one that has done all the bills. Also, we've been together. So you've been with your wife for 30 years. Adam and I have been together. We've been married for 18, together for 23. Combined finances. We didn't combine finances right away. Like we were in high school. But we did get cell phones together when we were seniors in high school. My parents were mad about that.
nice.
Anyway, um, but pretty early on, right? We started same. We didn't have anything. Um, for the two of us when we started. We didn't come into a relationship like if people now, if they're getting married in their late 20s or 30s or even 40s, right? And they each have an established career and they have their own stuff. And we didn't have that. We started out with nothing, and have built from the ground up, right? But there were times, so I was the one with the money anxiety. And I can recall times where I would be like trying to figure out how we're going to pay the bills and just like so much stress, so much anxiety, like to the point of tears, right? Like, I don't know how this is going to work. Um, and I've been the one that's been more creative, I would say, in that, like, I'll give you an example. When it was 2008, gas prices were insane. They were so high. It was like in Cincinnati, I think it was approaching like $4 and $5 per gallon. We had a Nissan Pathfinder. It was a great vehicle, but it got like 16 miles to the gallon. It was not good. 17, I don't know. It wasn't good. And I had to drive a ton for work. And I realized, okay, if we actually get a Prius, if we trade in this nice Pathfinder and get a Prius instead, even though it'll have a higher monthly payment, we're actually going to save like $300 a month because the gas is costing so much and it's not going down. Um, and so like that, my brain has always kind of worked in that way to be like, hey, here's this creative solution that's going to help, but we have to like do something that feels a little bit counterintuitive, like get a new car, in order for it to work, right?
You got to
Um,
look at all the different options, right?
Gotta look at all the options. Yes. So that has typically been my role in our relationship. But there was, gosh, when I had Clara, when I had our first baby, I was like, okay, maybe you can do this part, right? Because it's like a lot to manage the stuff and new baby, and maybe you take on the month to month finances. And it was fine, but it still fell back to like it's just more in my wheelhouse, right? And so rather than this like duplicating efforts piece, right? We were really duplicate because I was still stressed about it, and he was like he had his calendar and he had everything mapped out, but it wasn't easy. And I was like, it's fine. I'll do it. I can do this part. It's in my wheelhouse. He manages so many other things in our lives. Um, and at the same time, I need his input. And we have to be on the same, like you're saying with you and your wife, we have to be on the same page. We have to understand where different things are. We have to have common goals. Um, and just, so I know for him, we have had times where like I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. And he's like, show me how it's gonna be fine because it doesn't feel fine right now. Like I feel like we're behind, or I feel like it doesn't feel good. And I've had to remember every couple of years, like, oh, I should actually run a financial plan for my own family because I
Absolutely.
right
Absolutely.
I need to show the same charts and graphs that I show every one of my clients. Like he needs to see that too, right? We need to have that, and I have. It's just something, the cobbler's children do have shoes in this house. Okay, it's not
Well,
not too bad,
yeah, but
but
I think that goes to the point that if you are the partner or spouse that is financially savvy and doing most of that for your household, you do have to periodically, and I would say every quarter at a minimum, or once a year at a minimum, I should say, sit down and go through your balance sheet and income statement with your non-financial spouse and or partner and say, this is where we are. These are the goals that we had agreed upon earlier.
Mhm.
This is where we are in relation to those goals, i.e., a financial plan. It doesn't have to be this big, super detailed financial plan, but it has to do something because, life changes, goals can change, right? And so it serves as a communication time to where maybe the non-financial spouse has been thinking of another goal that she or he wants to insert into the mix, right?
Mhm.
I'll give you an example of philanthropy, right? Uh, you know, uh, at a certain point in life and in financial independence, sometimes couples or partnerships want to start to give back at a certain point, right?
Mhm.
They are on track for all the other goals that they had set in their lives. Well, philanthropy is a late comer to the goal spectrum, or so
Yeah.
usually that's the last step. That's the last goal that couples or people will want to introduce to their financial goals. And so and oftentimes it could be one spouse has more strong feelings about it than another. And those annual meetings are a great time to say, okay, do we add gifting to our basket of goals? What are the causes that we want to gift to, that we want to donate to? How much should we do? How much can we do? Right? Some of that has tax implications. How do we give it most effectively? Do we go through a donor advised fund? Do we give cash? Do we give securities? I mean, there's a number of things around there um, that a financial planner would help walk a client through. But I would say at a minimum, and I think working with a professional financial planner, I think is incredibly important. It oftentimes gives us the opportunity for a couple to, in a non-judgmental way, to introduce those new goals, track how we're doing, all of those things. And for those listeners or viewers, if you don't have a financial planner, please reach out to Hannah. She does a fantastic job with clients that are just starting out to clients that are really looking to retirement or in retirement and are looking to look at their estate goals. So it's really important to get, a non-biased financial planner, very educated, to help you do it in the most effective and efficient way possible, so that you accomplish all of your goals, not just one.
Yeah, and as you were talking, like what was coming up for me was that that space, like having um for me, one of the most important things for me is that I bring a lot of emotional intelligence into my meetings with clients. There's a lot of technical expertise, but like that's a minimum. Like all financial advisors should have a base level of expertise, right? That's a given. What I think is more important to the actual conversation itself is the emotional intelligence and being able to hold that safe space for stuff to come up. Because when I'm working with spouses, I don't think I've ever had one couple where there wasn't at least some meeting where there was a lot of tension. And I mean like cut knife, like cut it with a knife tension around something that was coming up, and being able to be a facilitator for that conversation to show that, hey, it's okay. This feels scary. Someone feels anxious. Someone's feeling hurt. Someone, like there's a lot of emotions coming up here, and it's okay. This is a safe space to talk about them so that we can get through to the other side of this conversation so you can see that you're still on the same team. Because otherwise, if you don't have that safe mediator, that's when those things can lead to like, oh, we just can't talk about it. And I just can't talk to you. And that 80% divorce statistic, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and that's the problem, is if you're not able to communicate with it and you don't rely on Hannah, then it can lead to an avoidance type behavior. And that avoidance behavior is, if you take it to its logical end, is not being on the same page and
right.
not being on the same team. And so we want to avoid that, you know, um, particularly for something that as dumb as finance. I mean,
In the grand scheme of things, yes. Like,
yeah, in the
exactly,
grand,
right? This is so dumb.
yeah, in the grand scheme of things, finance is not the most important thing in the world. However, if you don't have it, it can be. It can overwhelm your life. So help us help you get over those things and make it a non-event, as
Hmm.
to, you're on track, you're going to get there. There might be some hiccups on the road. That's okay. That's already built into the plan. Those types of things, that's just the process. And helping overcome and helping couples and clients and partners communicate one with another, I think is incredibly important, particularly around finance.
Yeah, I get the comment like, oh, so you do marriage counseling too, huh? Like, it feels like that sometimes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's part of the job. Uh,
Yeah.
being honest. And last note that I wanted, you brought up estate planning a little bit,
Mhm.
and that is another place. We could do an entire another entire episode on that with um how hard estate planning can be on a relationship and
Yep.
on generational relationships if you don't make your wishes known. Or even sometimes when you do make your wishes known and people don't like it, right? Like estate planning and relationships when it comes to money, is another huge, um, sensitive, tender topic. And so it's another place where, I really, really encourage people. Like, this is what, if we're doing a financial plan and they don't have their estate documents in place, or if they have young kids and they don't have guardianship provisions set, like, that's your, before any of the accounts that we're talking about, that's your number one priority. Like, that has to be the first thing that you take care of because it's that important to create a system for what happens when you're not here, what happens to your spouse, what if you have, if you're on a second marriage or a third marriage, or if you have a blended family, it's even more important. The relationship fallout that can happen if things are not spelled out and things are not clear, it lasts for generations and it can be very, very sad.
Yeah,
uh,
it
it's
can be.
crazy, it really can be crazy.
And we can do one where I can share some more stories if you want to do an episode like that, because I've got a lot of horror stories about people not being on the same page, it be getting implemented wrong or what have you. So
Or
there's a lot
not
of
having
pitfalls.
any, yeah, not having anything in place, or thinking it was, like thinking there was more time, all of that, so that can certainly be another episode that we focus on, relationship wise, because how do we not just preserve our relationships in life, but I know, my in-laws, my parents, I don't want for my, like, they don't want their kids to not have relationships anymore because of money after they die. I
Correct.
don't want my kids to not have relationships anymore, because of money, right? Like,
Dumb.
nobody wants that.
No, it's easily avoidable
Hmm.
if you plan ahead.
All right. Well, maybe that's our topic for next week. Stay tuned. We'll see, because there could also be some lots of other things to talk about after the inauguration. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet. But thank you so much, Brad, for I just really appreciate like getting to have like more of a human emotional conversation, on Investment Friday, because I think that's super important. And it's super important for people to hear from investment professionals like us that we still deal with anxiety around money, or things coming, like things that we've had to work through ourselves. It's really powerful to like see that, like, yeah, we're humans.
And every relationship is different. So if something doesn't work for you, don't stop trying. You will find a system that works. So
I love that. I love that positive note. So if anyone has questions, if this has brought up any specific questions for you that you would like for us to talk about more, let me know. You can get me at Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com for the podcast. And Brad, how can people get a hold of you?
get a hold of me at bhaines, Bhaines at juncturewealth.com, or call our main number 480-253-4100.
Nailed it. Thanks, Brad. Talk to you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, Hannah, at expansiveceo.com, and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.